We're starting with the hands at the heart in Tadasana. If you can, bring the feet together comfortably, and if you're not pregnant, because if you are, it's better to have the feet apart, then do so. If you can bring the feet together comfortably, fine to have them apart. The hands are in Namaskara. The heel of the hand is at the bottom of the breastbone, the xiphoid cartilage. There's a light pressure through the heel of the hand as if you're pressing into something lightly, like a little shelf or something like that. Something that has a little resistance. And of course, the yogin is relaxed. She is meditative. She is playful. She is focused around her breath. She is focused around absorption here and now. So absorption is very natural. And the word natural, of course, appears a lot in yoga, in the Sanskrit form sahaja. Interlace your fingers to their roots. So now the hands are close. You can feel more. You can feel where the fingers are interlaced. Stretch your arms diagonally down and then raise them up. Suck in the tummy from the front, the sides and back. And make sure everything flows. The neck, the tummy, the lower back, the hips. And you can use movement to conduce to flow. If you can find movement that does conduce to flow, I certainly can. You know, if I move my feet and I move my legs, then I can find movement that conduces to flow. Great, big, wide circle, hands come back to the heart. I'm just going to push this camera further back to give you an even much more better view than ever before. Twist the hands at the heart. We're going to step or jump the feet apart. I jumped because I'm that sort of personality. Well, I have been this far in the first half century has been like that. Back toes in, left toes in, right foot and leg out, turning on the ball of the foot first, and for most of the turn, and finishing off the turn on the heel. Find the pelvic floor, raise your lead arm, that's your right arm. Inhale, exhale, Utthita Trikonasana. And breathing through the nose. You might realize that the triceps consist of 3 muscle heads, triceps. And that means that at the top of the arm, they connect to slightly different places. And one of the triceps, the long head of the triceps, inserts to your shoulder blade. So if you bend your bottom elbow, go ahead. Just bend your bottom elbow a little bit, that's it. And then press down to re-straighten it. Imagine a pull down from your shoulder blade towards the ground. Well, that's the long head of the tricep, pulling. That's a good thing. You want to breathe into that, pulling on the shoulder blade and opening the chest. Lots of other movements might work in tandem with that, but that's one thing to enjoy. Inhale, come on up. Well done. Hands to hips, feet face forwards, back toes. Let's turn the toes before we raise the arm this time. Back toes in, front foot and leg out, turning on the ball of the foot first, finishing off the last bit of the turn on the heel. And so that should give you heel to arch alignment, I think. If you're doing things well and right, light tone on the tummy, raise the arms and lift the chest. Breathe through the nose and find the pelvic floor. Inhale, raise your lead arm. Exhale, come down. It's sometimes useful to imagine that your front leg is supported from behind. So there's a sort of energetic support that comes from the back of the leg, as it were, towards the front of the leg. Energetic means currents, directional energies. When we talk about energetic in yoga, we're talking about energy flow. And energy flow is a metaphor for a directional intention that then influences muscles and skin and fascia and so on. So hopefully the breath's deep and honest and the eyes are soft. Let's go ahead and bend that bottom elbow again. See if we can try again to tune in on the long head of the tricep. Don't hold your breath, let that flow. Be relaxed. And then as you re-straighten the arm, imagine it pulling down from the shoulder blade towards the ground. We're pulling on the long head of the tricep and it turns the body. Very interesting, sort of meditative. Now we're not coming up from this, we're coming down. So we're going to swing the top arm down to the floor, both hands either side of your front foot. Externally rotate your back leg foot and stretch back to, of course, the beautiful Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. My first recommendation, as it usually is to pad your paws into a deeper weave with the mat. So every time you lift and replace your hands, they go into a deeper weave, as it were, the molecules of the hand, the molecules of the mat, meshing into one another. And that's really important because you can then use that energy to extend through your inner armpits, your outer arms, all the way back to your groins, the top of the inner thighs. And then the groins open up, there's a lifting and an opening. Well done. Everyone coming down to hands and knees, catch your breath there. Have a little wiggle, a little shake, move the pelvis around and breathe easily. Eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft. Opposites now, opposite leg, opposite arm, come off the floor. Whether you prefer to have your toes tucked or pointing back is fine either way, but allow fluidity, as if your leg and arm were like a compass needle. The compass needle sort of floats, doesn't it? And that floating can be up and down, but it also can be medial and lateral. And it wants to be very unorganized, sort of natural, really spontaneous. Okay, bring yourself back to hands and knees and catch your breath. Again, maybe another wag of your tail if you find that useful. Same on the other side. That is opposites, opposite arm, opposite leg. And encouraging a lightness which is psychophysical necessarily. So, really bobbing around. And when it's right, doubt doesn't arise, because doubt is replaced by this intuition, we could call it, intuitive knowing. And it's always showing up in the breath when it's right as well. The top leg could drift right across the bottom leg or away from the bottom leg, whatever feels right. The front hand could be lower or higher, or medial or lateral. It's not idle, the mind isn't drifting. The body is floating, but the mind is not drifting. It's moving with the way things are, not away from. Okay, back to hands and knees. Again, a little wag of the tail and a few deep breaths. Down to your forearms now, so they're on the bones, and stretch your legs back. The body just hovering above the floor, but you don't have to keep it fixed. In fact, I recommend that you move forwards, back, left, right, up, down, so that you don't build up lactic acid, so that you do share the load between many muscle fibers. Well done, knees forwards, sitting up, kneeling position. As you know from other classes, I'm sure, you might use a block between the heels and buttocks if your knees are tight. Your knees are tight. So a few deep breaths, one palm atop the other, palms facing up. If your thumbs are touching, we sometimes call that meditation mudra, dhyana mudra. And maybe there's movement, side to side, massaging, of course, lots of muscle areas, anterior tibialis, gastrocnemius, soleus, hamstrings, quadriceps, gluteal muscles, piriformis, on and on, through the back, and the shoulders, even to the neck. One can feel, the more one relaxes, the more one can feel. Now release your hands and come to lay on your back with your hands underneath your head in a manner that I'm going to describe as oh so casual. Okay, so laying on your back, oh so casual, fingers interlaced. Breath is everything, because we're yoga practitioners. So breath is everything. One is keeping the jaw soft. Go ahead and flex up the hips. Lift up the feet. Again, breathing freely. Lift up the head as well.
The lower back is close to the floor, the eyes are soft, the brain is also soft and relaxed. Breaths come, breaths go. Opposite elbow, opposite knee will come together, but first open the angle at the back of both knees, and then you choose which way to go. Opposite elbow, opposite knee come towards each other, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they come together. It's just that's the trajectory that they're following. Back to center and to the other side. Again, the trajectory would be as if your knee and elbow would come together, but they don't actually have to. Back one more time on each side. This isn't just about the deep belly. This is also about what's happening to the back in terms of massage. Last time, last side. Jaw soft, breathing deep. Turning to center, lowering down, head and feet, breathing deep, 4 or 5 deep breaths, let them happen. Letting them happen. So the yogin is getting in touch with flow. The yogin is getting in touch with flow rather than grasping, which is kind of like the opposite of flow. Grasping, becoming, figuring out, trying, all that is the opposite. Now we're going to tone the tummy in a wave. That is to say, the tummy is going to go in and up in a wave, in and up. We're going to lift the pelvis up off the floor when we're ready, and a little bit of movement. Left, right, up, down, circling, tilting, bouncing. Essentially whatever is of use. Circling, tilting, bouncing, of use in terms of the yoga project, which is absorption into that flow or the interdependent field, because everything is just like that. Reality might not seem to flow, but that's because we're not open to it. We're mostly looking at our own projections and ignoring reality. But the more we give, the more we breathe and feel and give, the more reality becomes apparent as flow beyond self. We come down slow, float down like an autumn leaf. There are still 1 or 2 left on the trees, I've noticed. And then simply lift the head up to look towards the navel. And breathe through the nose. Jaw soft, eyes soft, throat soft. And then feel the upper abdominal fibers lowering you like someone lowering a bucket into a well via a rope. And so the head comes down and then lift it up again, similarly. Right, so we're going to do that 3 times in total, going from concentric contraction through eccentric contraction and into isometric contraction. So concentrics, as we come up, let's do it one more time, come up. Isometrics, where we pause for a moment, and eccentric is the lowering of a bucket down into a well using a rope. That rope is the abdominals, so the abdominals, especially the upper abdominals. Once you've landed, take a breath. Release your hands from behind your head and take another breath. Raise up one of your legs. Doesn't matter which one, you've only got 2, and we'll do the other one in a minute. So you're going to lay on your back, and you're going to put a leg up in the air, okay? So that's pretty straightforward. And then dorsiplantar, 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 flex your foot, back and forth, dorsiplantar, dorsiplantar. And interlace your fingers around your thigh, rather, the back thigh of your raised leg. Taking breath, soft eyes, soft brain. The thigh presses into the hands press into the thigh, and the breath flows. And it's the combination of those 3 things together that make this pose work. The 3 things together. Hands into the thighs, thighs into the hands, and the breath flowing. And what it does, what it means, it makes it work, means that energy comes, or sensation, or heat, whatever you want to call it, in round the knee, and then you comb that up. You brush that up, you stroke that up towards the pelvis. So as the energy comes, it keeps coming and arriving, you keep drawing it up. Okay, great. Let's do the same with the other leg. So that one goes down and the other one goes up. Again, deep, honest, and expressive breathing is what we want. And once we've got our fingers behind the thigh and we've got those three things together, then you get the result that we're looking for: tingling, warmth, sensation, buzzing, however it appears to you. Sensation in the tibia. That we, as it were, comb up, draw up, we encourage up. And up here actually means down. It means towards the pelvis. So sort of up the leg, but down to the floor, towards the floor. Make sure you've got all the components together, Breath, pressure from hands to thigh, pressure from thigh to hands. Okay, excellent. Bring your leg back down and roll over. If you're in a position where you can roll to face to the screen, then do that. But if not, it's totally fine. Otherwise, we're going to lay on our sides. If it's okay, we're going to prop our heads onto our hands. And if it's not okay, for whatever reason, to do that, you can use something between your head and arm, with your arm extended like a cushion or a neatly folded blanket or towel. Once you're on your side, let's just extend a bit. So use the hand that your head is not on. Press into the floor and stretch. Do it a few times. Come on, you can do a bit more. Stretch, that's it. So you actually start really, really, really feeling. You start really feeling more and more contact. And it feels great because you tune in. And you can enhance that tuning in with movement, such as forwards and backwards movement, which are kind of massagey, aren't they? Forwards and backwards movement. And sometimes you can find really rich moments, and they provide an opportunity to disappear into them. Okay. Now you could roll like that ad infinitum, I reckon, but what we're going to do is start bringing the top leg up and flex it back and forth. The hip, that is, flexing means closing the angle at the joint, and extending means opening the angle at the joint. So moving between flexion and extension at the hip, but also moving between the horizontal position and the vertical. And playing back and forth with the legs, so you kind of massage and hydrate. And also encourage your attention away, gently teasing it away from preoccupation about the past, and also stories about the present. That's also part of what the Buddha says causes problems. Attachment to the past, attachment to the future, and attachment to ideas about the self in the present. Now you can either just work the leg up until it's reached the vertical naturally, or you can do it in a more sort of intensive way, which would be to flex it and externally rotate it on an exhalation. It's up to you. And once the leg is up, we're going to reach for the big toe, trying to get the hand to the foot. More than the foot moves to the hand moves instead to the foot. And then take your time to begin to raise the leg. And of course, straightness isn't what we're looking for, but absorption is what we're looking for. So if your leg becomes straight, but you feel less absorbed, you feel more separated out. You've got more of a sense of me as a sort of separate identity from everything else. then that's really not successful yoga. So you could have a scenario where someone's really flexible, maybe they've got a past in dance or something, and their leg comes really easily, but they might be feeling, you know, look at what I'm doing, I'm achieving a lot, but that's a sense of separation, isn't it? So you could have a bent leg and be fully yogic. You could have a straight leg and be fully yogic. It's nothing to do with whether it's bent or straight. It's to do with how the breath is expressing meditation in the present moment. Okay, well done, everyone. Bring the leg back down. This is, of course, called Anantasana. Knees up, come up from the side just with a little push, and back down again. Back down onto your side. Pretty much the same sort of start, which is a lovely thing to do, because it gets you into this. So easy to get into the story about oneself, isn't it? But we want to get into this. It's our liberation. This is why we have goddess worship, because the goddess is the interdependent field, and she's liberative. So lengthen those ribs, stretch those armpits. Well, that armpit, I should say. Let me do it one at the moment. The bottom armpit. Repeatedly get that contact with the floor. And breathe through the nose, and maybe there's going to be a bit of movement forwards and backwards as part of the meditation, part of the absorption. The jaw, of course, is passive in a pose like this. The jaw is passive. And the yogin or yogini is moving for meditation. In fact, the word yoga is a synonym for the word dhyana, which means meditation, for the word samadhi, which means meditation, for the word samapati, which means meditation. When you're ready, if you're ready, you can start ranging that top leg. Now, although we want sensation to gather around the hip, it's possible to have too much sensation, for it to be hot. We don't want the joints of the body to be overheated. We want the joints to have energy, but the energy has a certain spaciousness to it. So when you're bringing your leg back and forwards, think about the way it impacts on your breath, the way it impacts on your mental states, because that's a mirror of what's going on in the body. If the mental states are kind of cooler and more spacious, and sort of easeful and relaxed and trusting, increasingly so, then that's right, that's how it should be, that's what we want. So again, one could play it until one's top leg is upright. Or one could bring the one leg to the upright with the dynamic external rotation combined with the flexion on an exhalation, which I'm about to do in case you need it for your reference. I really like that action because it focuses my mind. You know, many of us do have scattered mind, chitta vikshepas. Again, reach for your toes. I quite like to jostle my fingers to intimate a sort of very spacious, jostly kind of energy in the body, where everything's kind of got room to move. And eventually one holds the big toes, and then we have, well, we don't have options, you know, in a sense. There are no options because we take whatever actions are absorbing. So that's the only option, really. But, you know, that does mean that we might be doing different things to what we did yesterday, what we'll do tomorrow, and what other people are doing. We might be doing the same things, we might be doing different things. The leg might extend partly or fully or stay bent. If you reframe the project as absorption, which is what, of course, the project is and always has been, then you'll have a much clearer idea of what yoga is, instead of thinking it's a bunch of bendy postures that you can do or you can't do, that have, you know, for some weird reason been kicking around exactly as they are for millennia. It's just not true. It's just not true. Hardly any of the postures that we practice in modern postural yoga
have any history at all, really. And nothing beyond the last 100 years, most of them. One or two might extend back a couple of hundred years. Less still if you go back 300 years, pretty much no standing poses. If you go back far enough, we end up, the poses are seated meditation poses only. But that principle of a seated meditation pose, sthira sukham, can be applied in every pose that we do nowadays. So it means stable and easeful, steady and easeful. You can even imply stillness and easefulness together. Great pose. We could stay a long time, but we're going to come down. We're going to bring the knees up. We're going to come straight over to Adho Mukha Svanasana, that's the down face dog, and take a breath or two. We are going to come into Vashisthasana, so you can do this if you've got any problems with your wrists. You can do this on your forearms, although often pressure through the wrist is very good for problems with the wrists, because those problems can be to do with misalignment or even tissue injury. It could be realigned through stretch or even pressure. Come up to Adho Mukha Svanasana, that's down face dog. Pad the pause. So hopefully the more you pad the pause, the more the mind feels absorbed. And you can also play with the legs, bending, extending, stretching one heel back and then the other, that kind of thing. Looking for openness on the inner arm and the outer arm. Through back to the groins are lifted, and the breath is deep. If you do have the screen to the side of you, take the hand that's furthest from the screen and bring it into the middle of the two hands, and turn round to face the screen on the side of your foot. Otherwise, it doesn't matter which way you do it. If you need a little extra support for the pose, use your leg behind you on the floor, bend your leg as I'm doing here, to press. In fact, I do recommend that. So you're going to take your leg, place it behind you, foot down, then you can play. You can raise the top arm up. You're playing with the shoulders. So sometimes bending your knees can be very useful as part of the meditation. Breath is our focus. We're feeling the way things are. Back to Adho Mukha Svanasana, down face dog, and turning around. Padding your paws. Although it's called dog, is more like a cat. A bit like Ralph, he does that when he can be bothered. And then we're going to bring the same thing. The opposite hand to the one you moved before now goes into the middle of the two hands. And you turn onto the side of your foot. And then again, I'm going to recommend that we take a little bit of extra help from our top leg behind us, so it's going behind. I'm exaggerating the movement so you can see it there on the floor. And then you can play. So you can bend your knees. You can see how much I've bent mine in case you need a reference, and then straighten them. And play with the pose in ways that are helping you. As I say, you can do this on your forearm as well. That's okay to do it that way if you need to, but it can be very beneficial for wrists to give them a stretch as well. Deep breaths, playful, breath-centered, easeful, Vashisthasana. Okay, well done. Okay, back to Adho Mukha Svanasana, the downward facing dog position. Catching a breath, catching a few breaths. Walk your feet a little closer to each other. They don't want to be really up close, but they're not too wide. And then when you're ready, when you've got a really good connection to the mat, raise up one leg, doesn't matter which one, and you can play with that raised leg in a variety of ways. For example, you could lift the heel on the standing leg, so the whole pose lifts higher. You could bend and extend the raised leg. You could turn out or in with the raised leg and combine those with various movements. So We're just playing. And in a moment, we're going to sweep the foot forwards into the place of its own hand on an exhalation. It might do that in 2 exhalations, it might be at 1, so in your own time. Sweeping the foot forwards. And then playing, hopefully with the stretch from the back groin, by dropping and lifting the back knee, pulling the front knee forwards and backwards in ways that are right because they're meditative. They're right because they're meditative. Eventually, the back knee will land on the floor behind the pelvis. The toes might be tucked under or they might be pointing back. We're going to climb up on our leg. Okay. If your back knee feels it needs more support, it might do, but it can be helped a lot by imagining a release from your inner groin up, from your inner groin of your back leg up. And we can help with that by raising our arms up. Really focus on the inner groin of the back leg. And imagine a release that your breath is part of, that the mind is part of, a meditative release. The breath is part of, that the mind is part of. Good job. Come back down and back to Adho Mukha Svanasana. Catch your breath, move in ways that help you catch your breath and that help you really get that contact with the floor. So the palms really making good contact with the floor. You probably guessed that we're going to do the same on the other side. Bring the feet fairly close, not together, but fairly close. Gives you a bit more stability when you raise up the other leg. And similarly, play. External rotation, internal rotation, lifting the heel on the stand leg, bending, extending the raised leg. These are just examples. You can mix it up in a variety of ways that help you in terms of absorption. When ready, the bent knee will sweep forwards and the foot comes into the place of its own hand on an exhalation. From that position, we begin play, forwards, backwards, up, down, internal rotation, external rotation. There's a lot of different things you can do. Breath is everything. And eventually the knee is going to land behind the pelvis again. We'll emphasize that. Tummy's going to be lightly toned. We're going to raise up the arms. Some people are more comfortable on their knee with the toes tucked under, some with the toes pointing straight back. But everyone will feel better if you focus on the inner groin. And it will pull you out of your stories. We all get caught in stories, especially in a global pandemic, when it's getting darker. You can really get caught in stories about that one way or another. But actually, reality is still reality. And it still can pull you out of any story, and that's what we need. So feel the psoas stretch, inner groin of the back leg across the pubis through to the deep belly. Feel the sides of the lower spine. And feel that the stretch is psychophysical. The stretch is psychophysical. Back you come to Adho Mukha Svanasana when you're ready. Down face dog. And again, catching your breath. Really pad those paws into the mat. Then we're going to repeat almost the same thing again, but not quite. This time, if you have the screen to the side of you, it doesn't matter which leg you did last time, you're going to do the leg that's closest to the screen. Same thing as we did before. So again, you step the feet together. Again, you're going to raise the leg. If you've got the screen to the side of you, you're going to raise the leg closest to the screen, but otherwise, either leg will be fine. On the exhale, the foot comes forward. You might need to do that in a couple of steps because it's a bit, bit hard, isn't it? And then playing backwards and forward. And here we're going to place our hand, same hand as the front leg, on the thigh. Thumb facing into the inner thigh, fingers facing out. And then back and forwards, up and down, hydrating, using movement as meditation. Meditation just means you disappear into something like a kiss on the cheek, or whatever, the smell of zesty biscuits cooking. So whatever, there's thousands of examples. Now, when you're ready, the knee's going to land on the floor and you're going to bring the arm, the opposite arm to the bent leg, onto the outside of the bent leg. Huh? And again, movement back and forth until you feel areas like the iliotibial tract on the outer leg starting to hydrate. And when it feels like there might be a little bit more scope for turn, your hand goes a little further up your thigh. Now I realize it's 8 o'clock at night, or whatever time it is, and you've probably had dinner, some sort of vegetarian feast, no doubt, some sort of casserole with lentils in. So be gentle on your belly and gently work it round as your hand comes up. You might not turn as far as you might in the mornings before you've eaten much. So go gently, but it does make a difference to move a lot. And it does make a difference to keep knocking on the door, but only enter when the door opens. There's no forcing. So what does it mean? What's that metaphor mean? It means keep seeing if there's more turn, but if there isn't, look for that which will condition it. Movement. So I really think just working on little bits of turn whenever is a good way to approach this posture. I'm going to release before even going any further. I'm going back to Adho Mukha Svanasana. Again, the downward facing dog position, breathing deep and honest. Okay, so again, get those palms padded in. Pad them, and feel the psychophysical nature of it, that the mind comes together as the body pads itself in into the mat. Jaw soft, throat soft. Obviously now we're going to raise the other leg up, and you know the kind of ways we've been playing, you can play again. Bending, extending, internal, external rotation, and so on. When ready, on an exhale, maybe 2 or 3 steps, or maybe 1, the leg comes forwards into the place of the hand. And again, we're playing to lubricate the fascia, the myofascia. We're bringing more blood into the area, which brings more heat. We're also evicting and then letting back in the tissue fluid into the fascia, as I mentioned, and melting as well. When you finally feel ready to land the back knee, you've really hydrated, then the same hand as your bent leg on top of your thigh, and then the opposite arm onto the outside of the leg. Opposite arm. And again, I think you're going to find movements beneficial, backwards and forwards. Working very, very gently. If it was a lentil bake you had, lentil by lentil, we're turning. Okay? Or chickpea by chickpea, or whatever it is you had for dinner. Vegetarian sausage by the, you know, I don't know. But go gentle. Okay? And we're big fans, aren't we, of little by little. We understand that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So repetition. Don't give up, don't space out, hearing my voice whittling on in the background. Don't let it lull you into a sort of fuzz. Keep turning. Keep turning. Or seeing if there is turn at least. See if there is a little bit more turn every so often. Great, okay. Nice easy release. Back to hands and knees. A little waggle and a little wiggle and a little jiggle. And then take either knee, doesn't matter, you choose, to the back of its own wrist. Can be either one. And the knee's going to stay there while the foot moves diagonally across the body. And you stretch back your other leg very easily. As I've mentioned in past classes, if there's pain in your knee, lean towards it. That works in most cases to alleviate the pain. But there are other ways if that doesn't work, but that usually does. And then if you find there's even mild discomfort in the knee, that should go, and you could gently work back to the center. Obviously, if there's no pain, you don't do that. You just start in the center. And you can be as high or as low as you like. But I do personally quite like to really stretch from the inner groin. So for me, a lift up is good. So you might find limiting yourself at least just to the forearms and not going lower will give you a stretch in the area that we quite want to target, which is the psoas. Top of the inner thigh, across the lateral pubis, underneath the abdominals. And attaching, can you sense the sides of your lower spine, either side, the discs, the lumbar discs, the bodies, that's just the bones, the transverse processes, little outcrops of bone to the sides of the spine. They're there for muscle attachment. Great. Okay. Nice and easy. Tuck under the back toes, come forwards by bringing your back knee forwards, and then come out. Back to hands and knees. Catch your breath there. Perhaps there's a little wiggling. Perhaps there's a little softening of your face. Perhaps there's a little absorption, opportunity into something that isn't the past and the future. When you're ready, the other knee to the back of the other wrist, the foot diagonally across the body, stretching back in your own time, avoiding any discomfort in the knee, by moving in slowly, but also there's that option to lean towards the knee if there is discomfort. If there's none, well, no need to lean. And then a lot of people find sort of massaging it into the hip can be quite useful for the project, which project, of course, is absorption. The breath, we want the breath to have a sort of expressive quality to it. An expressive quality to it. Which is necessarily uncontrived. Wouldn't be expressive if it was contrived. It's necessarily not contrived, it's just expressive. Draw soft eyes, soft brain, soft throat, soft. Right, okay. Coming forwards and tucking under the back, toes, bringing that back knee forward, and then coming back to hands and knees. Before bringing yourself towards the end of your mat, crossing your legs in a simple crossed-legged position. By the way, if you've got any problems with your back, raise your feet up for this. Put them on some blocks. If you have blocks or books of even height, your bum will be on the floor, but your feet will be elevated. If you've got any tightness or anything in the back at all, and you can go as high, if you've got lots of blocks, as 4 blocks, that's 2 stacks of 2, next to each other, long side to long side. If you think about the blocks as having sides and ends, and long sides that go together. Either with your feet on the floor or on the blocks, tuck under the buttocks, come down to your elbows. After that, tuck under again, and all the way down to the floor. So cross-legged on the floor. My recommendation to us all is to move around a bit once you're down, to hydrate fascia, so that you can perhaps bring your arms to the floor, but it's totally fine. In fact, it's very, very wise to bring your hands to something in particular, not the floor, but to blocks or whatever. Breath deep. Neck relaxed. If you're not sure at any point, if you become unsure how to practice yoga, ask a simple question. What is there in this moment that I can give? What's available? What's obvious? Attachment to the future might be manifesting intention in the body. You could give that. You don't have to hold on to that.
when we've spoken before about 3 elements of Vajrasati Yoga, Lila, Artha, Lakshana, we've said that the Lakshana, the signs, the indicators of successful yoga include breath opening. The breath opens itself up, becomes more expressive. Change the cross of your legs so that the other one's in front. Again, keeping the jaw passive and the eyes also relaxed and passive. The neck soft. The breathing easy and natural. Okay, a couple more breaths like this. And when you're ready, bring the legs back together. And we're just going to lift our bums up. That means also if your feet are on blocks, you don't have to take them off blocks. You can stay on the blocks. You might need to bring your bum closer to the blocks, but we're going to lift the bum up and sway it and tilt it and bounce it, whatever else it needs to open it. So dropping, tilting, swaying, bouncing could all be included. Gradually lowering yourself down until you're down. Arms come forwards, maybe they're a little tight, so you give yourself movement, and then raise up one leg. Open the angle at the back of the knee so that the sole of the foot faces the ceiling, and then reach for the foot and push the leg down to the side of the ribs. And you can let the whole body roll in that direction. There's nothing wrong with that. And breathe into that stretch, which you can play out. The leg can move in ways that are, that take words away. They take words away. At least they take the right movements take descriptive words away and replace them with expressive words. Like ooh and ah and wow and Jesus and whatever, the sort of expressive, oh God, kind of words that we might, or sounds that are indicative of the meditation. Releasing and placing, tucking under and breathing. Raise up the second leg similarly. Bend at the knee and then reach for the foot and let the leg move down to the side of the ribs. Sole of the foot facing up, allowing everything to roll. And mostly allowing the breath to roll. Deep, organic, honest breathing. So looking for sensations that are sufficiently evocative. Okay, release when you're ready. Place your foot down, roll over, and in fact, right over and onto your hands and knees. Once you're on your hands and knees, then we're going to take one foot forward to the little finger side of its own hand. So the hand isn't moving, but the foot's just at the little finger side of that hand. And then we can move the hand or arm, because we're going to let the leg move backwards and forwards, playing, perhaps even the elbows at a certain point backwards or forwards might come close to the floor. The jaw has a passivity to it. And you're looking for various stretches into the groin that again are meditative in the sense that they eat you. They eat your views and opinions about where you should and shouldn't be. They disappear, they get eaten. So there's lots of movements you could take, but you could also find a couple of positions just work just right as they are. You don't need to move. You just find a position that's rich. Okay, well done. That will probably do for that leg. Let's take a breath back on our hands and knees and a little wag of the tail. Any other movements that you find useful. And the other leg then comes forwards to the little finger side of the other hand. And then some play. So that might mean you range forwards, you kind of creep the arms forwards. So many different things you could do with this. Creep backwards. For some people find that when they go backwards or when they go forwards, the elbows can lower a little bit. Some people find that the elbows even reach the floor, not that that's in any way important, other than as a meditation. So looking for those moments. And you might have found one, and there's no need to look for another one while the one you're in is working, while it's absorbing. Okay, come out nice and easy. Back again to hands and knees. And then from there, we're going to come down. We're going to extend our legs out in front of ourselves and give ourselves a much deserved energy bath. That means rubbing the face, the hair, the chest, the back, the armpits. Of course, a good bath always, one remembers to do the armpits, back of the legs, front of the legs. Doing what you can to just distribute energy everywhere. Try and even get the bits of the body where it's hard to get sun cream. Okay? When you're ready and you've had a really good energy bath, you're going to take hold of a foot. You don't have to do it as sort of flamboyantly as I am, but you just take hold of a foot and put a foot in the crook of the opposite elbow without distorting the foot position. In other words, the position at the ankle is even on both sides of the ankle, inner and outer. You're not twisting towards the inner or something like that, it's even. So just check your foot is level, as it would be if you were standing on the floor, and then play. You can open the angle at the back of the knee, you can pull backwards or forwards. Looking for juicy moments, rich moments. Some of you know from past classes that there are variants where you can even come down to the floor. I'm doing one now, which can make it certainly, another level of intensity. But chances are you don't need another level of intensity, but it's enough. Just really playing into it, breathing into it. Okay, slow and easy release. Stretch that leg. Another energy bath before we do the other side. So make it fairly dynamic to the hair, the earlobes, around the eyes, wherever you can. And again, do encourage you to try and reach for those bits of the body that are hard to get sun cream. You normally have to ask someone else to
Can you just do that bit there, usually between the shoulder blades, but don't force the issue, but see if you can get closer to that area, because you don't want sunburn, do you? And once you've given yourself a really thorough, and you feel, you know, more alive, then bring up the other leg, similarly to the first, and again it goes into the crook of the opposite elbow. And again, we're going to emphasize not twisting the foot, that it stays even between the inner and outer ankle, and then play. The knee, angle at the back of the knee can open more or less. The leg can come further forwards or further back. The whole body can move further forwards or further back. And then there's variants which look a bit like wrestling, but there's only one wrestler, which you know, are optional. They might not be, you know, necessary. And those sort of optional extras. But the point is, it should be rich enough. That's what we're looking for, something that's rich enough to sort of challenge the way our minds just keep getting caught up in, well, conditionality. You often hear people, don't you, saying things like, oh God, I'm getting more and more like my mum or my dad, and you know, and I always swore I wouldn't, even though my mum and dad are perfectly lovely and war not, you know, whatever they're like. But you know, the point is, those are just habits. We're conditioned by our society and so on. And whenever we feel like we're moving or acting out of our habits, it feels limiting. Doesn't feel right, doesn't feel authentic actually. Because even though that's what we call our personality, that's not who we actually are. We're free of that essence. So this play kind of tunes you out of getting caught in those patterns, and then you can really start to recognize and appreciate who your real, or what your real nature is. Okay, once you've played with that, then we're going to bring the soles of the feet together. And if it's easy to prop your back against a support, I would definitely do that if I were you. So if you're really close to a wall, just shift back against it. You can use a block so that it's right down to the floor and it's on its sort of highest height, a flat block. So they come in sort of foam and other space materials. It's fine if you haven't got some support behind you. You can see I'm not using a support because Ralph is currently, here he is, he's against the radiator and I can't really, haven't got the heart to move him. So I'll just stay where I am. Oh, he's moved himself. I quite like to rock a little bit in the pose. Maybe you find utility in that too, in terms of release, the inner groins, which I think is lovely, meditative. And of course, it's supposed to be meditative. That's what yoga is supposed to be. And so we encourage that, enjoy that, and breathe into that and give to that. Any little knots in the body we can identify, whether they be around the knees or the groins or somewhere else. Great, okay. It's a good pose, isn't it? It's really worth staying a while. We're going to bring ourselves out of Baddha Konasana into something that's connected, Upavishta Konasana. So Upavishta means to sit, seated, Upavishta, and Kona just means angle. So a seated angle, you want the angle between, from the midline to each leg to be the same. So you can imagine there's a midline in the center of your pubic bone, which in fact there is, a little slip of cartilage right in the middle, pubic symphysis. And the legs are the same distance from that midline. They don't have to be super wide. That there is a pose where the legs are super wide, but this isn't it. And it's often useful to sit on a block if you feel at all collapsed. Because you're a yogi, you know that you want energy to move up. You want to come into the center and away from, you know, the peripheral, where it's all about conditioning and what's going on in society and what, you know, who is in the White House and all blah, blah, blah. Important stuff, but at the same time, you don't feel centered if you get too caught up in that. Being centered is the place where you can act from power, or from the three Shaktis, as it's sometimes known, because Shakti just means power. It's a feminine version of the Sanskrit word Shakta, which means power. Now we're going to lift and turn towards one leg, you choose, and you've got two, and feel our energy releasing through the other. So you're turning towards one, but feeling the energy releasing through the other. In some cases, it feels right to extend further, but further doesn't mean better, and I think we need to really be clear about that. Because, you know, the further a star is from our planet, it doesn't mean it's better. You know, the further away each star is, it's like they become better and better. It doesn't work like that. Further doesn't mean better. So there's the option to extend forwards if that feels right, but also to not, if that feels right. Coming up and turning the other way, to the other leg, in other words. Fingertips on the floor. Feeling, what I think is really enjoyable and important, is as you turn to one leg to feel energy releasing into the other. Again, you can extend. And the breath is deep, the breath is natural. Coming up if you went down, or turning back to center, if we were all turned, and taking a breath or two. And in the same way that we felt or not like going forwards, we can feel or not like going forwards here. So you might go a little bit forwards, but keep your toes turning up. And then just breathe into that, because there's definitely a challenge. The challenge is to feel this turn into integration. And if you just keep moving further and further forwards before each stage is integrated, then you end up with less and less integration, so it becomes less and less yogic. So you can lean forwards by putting your hands on the floor ahead of you, or keep them behind you if you feel you can't keep much integrity forwards. And most people will find a little bit forwards is a big enough challenge to breathe into, and one or two may just have that kind of body that's bendy, and that's fine to go really far forwards, but it's not better to, unless it's better for you, you know. So for me, it is better to go further forward, and that can be misleading. You could then think, well, look, that's where I should be, and it isn't. You should be wherever there's a challenge, you should breathe into that, you should digest that. Okay, we're coming up if you went forwards, or we're coming out one way or the other, fairly gently steering ourselves out from that. And we're going to take one of two choices now, and they're basically going to do exactly the same thing. Either a Sukhasana. Now, if you happen to have, say, a couple of bricks, that's kind of useful, but one's okay as well. So Sukhasana or Agni Stambhasana. So Sukhasana is cross-legged, and it's really strong. This is what we're going to do in Sukhasana, so you probably don't need Agni Stambhasana. And then the brick's going to go ahead of you. If you've got two, you can put a brick on top of a brick, or even do it that way for even more height. And then you can work the heights down as we go through the pose. So that's cross-legged. Agni Stambhasana will be the same, just to be clear what Agni Stambhasana is. We'd have one leg in front of us, like mine is here, and then the other leg comes on top, like two fire logs, and that's kind of what Agni Stambhasana means. And then lifting and shifting until the legs come one on top of the other. They don't have to land on top of each other, but often a lift and a shift will make that happen. So I'm in Agni Stambhasana, you might be in Sukhasana or whatever. The brick is ahead of you, I'm facing you for now, but you don't have to face me unless you want to. And we're starting with the hands on the brick, that's all. And maybe finishing with the hands on the brick. Maybe the middle will be hands on the brick as well. Because a little lean forwards can be very strong in the hips. In either version, Sukhasana, Agni Stambhasana. And one can use movement to find meditative releases, in other words, sensations that are rich enough to stop speech, to eat you. So you could lean to the left, you could lean to the right. You don't want pain in the knees, you do want sensation being absorbed into the hips. It's possible, but not necessary, that one or two might bring their head to the block. And obviously the block can be lowered to various heights as needs require. Now coming up the way you went down, and maybe we didn't go down, and that's fine too, of course. And then gently coming up, you're in Agni Stambhasana, one leg's on top of the other, so you're going to swap that around. Maybe you're going to have a little stretch out first. And the same for Sukhasana, if it's one leg in front of the other, now it's the other leg in front. Remember, if you are taking Agni Stambhasana, you can lift and shift, and that can really be useful for the positioning that we take. Again, best first position is hands on block. And often it's the best middle position too, and it's often the best last position. It's often more than enough. And of course, yogis are definitely people who recognize enough. They recognize enough, right? That's a very important skill, and it's a very yogic skill. It comes under the category of santosha, which means contentment and gratitude, the way things are. As with the other side, there's the option to lower the brick if that feels appropriate, or to bring their head to the brick if that feels appropriate. Breathing into it, take it in bite-sized chunks. Make sure it's the right amount and not too much. Too much is indigestible, isn't it? If you take too much, you can't digest it. Okay, well done. Come out slow, come out easy. Big stretch, that is. And we're going to stretch out the legs for a moment in Dandasana. I'll show you sideways. Of course, you can sit on the block for Dandasana, and it's often useful to do so. We're going to draw the buttock flesh out and back. and come to the inner front edge of the ischial tuberosities. The hands come from level by the knees, just give the floor, just above the floor, a rub and stretch your arms back, and then sit up really tall. And you might facilitate that tall position through movement, backwards, forwards, and so on. So movement backwards, movement forwards can all be useful. As part of a meditation. Meditation of space in the spinal column and space in the central channel immediately in front of it. Release from Dandasana, beautiful though it is, beautiful pose. And we're going to virtually culminate, but not quite, the class with Siddhasana. So I'm showing you a brick because if you're okay to sit in Siddhasana, that's my recommendation, but it's equally okay to sit in a different seated position as long as you can sit up tall. So Siddhasana is where you've got the heels lined up with each other and with the midline of the body and the chest is elevated. But you can have folded legs, you can even sit in a chair. Just getting in touch with the breath once you're in a comfortable position and imagining that there are 3 channels. And the way we imagine it in this particular practice is that 2 of them connect to the left and right nostrils. So there's a channel that connects to the left nostril, there's a channel that connects to the right nostril. And they start at the nostril and then inside their head, they go up, hit as it were the top of the inside of the skull, and then curl back down either side of the central channel, all the way down to the pelvic floor where they meet. Okay, so those are the 2 channels that we're imagining first of all. And then there's another channel that meets them as well. They all meet at the pelvic floor. And that other channel, of course, doesn't get a nostril because they're already occupied. So it goes right up through the Ajna chakra and through the forehead and up to a point just above the head. So 3 channels, left, right, central. They also correspond to colors, the channels. The left one, we're going to say the left one to keep it simple. There are other rules, so we're not going to go into those. But we're going to say that the left one is right and that the right one is red, or it can be red, or it can be a tawny color, or it can be reddish brown, which is tawny, or even a yellowish color. But it's called pingala, which means reddish. And then the central channel is blue. So that's simple. 3 channels, 2 nostrils, have a channel each. All the channels meet at the pelvic floor, and the central channel rises up through the center of the forehead and through several little energetic centers above the forehead and before the crown. Okay, now all we're going to do is take 3 breaths through each nostril. Each in-breath will be imagined as if it were made of green light, as if it were bringing green light in. The first one we're going to do, don't do it yet, because I want to explain it, will be through the left. So you imagine green light in a minute, go through the left, goes all the way down to the pelvic floor. It shifts over. It shifts over to the other channel at the pelvic floor. Remember, they all co-terminate there like tube stations. And then it comes out, that green light comes out through the opposite channel. And as it comes out through the opposite nostril, you imagine it coming out as blue light, okay? The next practice will be the same, but in reverse, but it will come out as pink light. And then I'll talk about the last practice in a minute. So let's just start 3 rounds, breathing in through the left channel and left nostril, imagining green light, down to the pelvic floor, hold it there, little antara kumbhaka, little pause, and it shifts over, comes out of the other channel and out as blue light. Each time you breathe in, you're telling yourself that you're purifying obstacles and obscurations to do with the past. So hopefully you've started already. You're going to do 3 rounds. It's coming out as blue light. It's coming in as green. It's moving through as green. It just comes out as blue. We're also purifying obstacles to do with aversion. If we're adverse to something, we're averse to something. Purifying that, obstacles and obscuration. By the time you've done 3, you should be ready for the next side. Comes in, green light through the opposite nostril, through the Pingala channel. Comes down to the pelvic floor, shifts channels to the left channel on the which is white. Comes out, and the end comes out as pink light. You're telling yourself you're purifying as you're doing it, obstacles to do with the future and to do with craving. And down the 3 rounds there, you might still be on them, which you should carry on. But when you've done, it's green light through both channels simultaneously, so both nostrils, down to the pelvic floor where they co-terminate. This is one of the interpretations of the way to interpret Hatara, sun and moon, is the mixture of the energies through both channels. They mix together and then they rise up through the central channel, so there's green light, come out of the crown of the head as black smoke, carbon neutral, does no harm to the environment, makes the environment more pure, dissolves in the infinity of space, so it dissolves without a trace. And as you're doing this, you're telling yourself you're dissolving obstacles and obscurations to do with the present and to do with ignorance, not seeing things clearly. So this will purify, will melt obstacles and obscurations in that category. 3 rounds. It's lovely to sit in stillness after this practice. And of course, one can do more than 3 rounds, one can do 5 rounds, or 10 rounds, or whatever. And 3 is good, works well. We're going to lay ourselves down just for a couple of minutes, because you can probably go straight from here to your bed, even. So I'm just going to lay down for a couple of minutes flat on the back, with the palms facing up. Make sure you're warm. We're not going to be there too long because I don't want you to fall asleep. Well, I suppose it wouldn't matter. Thank you, Matt. Remember, if you ever become, as it were, lost, then come back to the simple instruction, give. Allow a little movement to come into your toes and fingers. And when you're ready, bend your legs. Place the feet onto the floor. Rolling to your left when you're ready to do so. And then to your right in your own time. Stretching out in your own ways, maybe rubbing your eyes or a hand through your hair. And take your own time to come up, and when you feel ready to come up, bring yourself up easy from the side.